Should we start with a little joke?
Yes, let's do it.
We had a little joke come in, which was very nice. So, Gordon, how does Moses make his tea?
I don't know, Adam. How does Moses make his tea?
He brews it.
He brews it.
That's from Rob Webb.
That's from Rob Webb. Very good.
Thank you, Rob. Glad that Rob's paying attention during our Old Testament series on that one. And then there were a few other questions as well. What other questions did we have that don't really come into the Old Testament series, but they're good questions, so we won't cover them. What did we have?
The first one was anonymously, what about the dinosaurs? Not much to do with the Old Testament.
Big one, that.
Yeah.
Big one, that. So we won't cover that, although there were dinosaurs.
There were.
And you can research at which particular point they came. Now all that fits in. There are many wonderful theories on all that.
What about hair covering? That was from a lovely young couple in the church.
Mm-hmm. Again, hair covering, we won't cover that one direct because it's sort of not Old Testament law as such. Comes out in the New Testament, that one. 1 Corinthians 11, 2-16 talks about women covering their heads. Do we want that in the church? When they prophesy?
We could do that.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one from the New Testament. On that, if you go to website thinktheology.co.uk, www.thinktheology.co.uk, type in head coverings. In the top right, you get a couple of good articles from Andrew Wilson on the head coverings and how it doesn't apply today, even though it's in the New Testament, because we have to look at the symbol of what it represents, and he unpacks that a little bit more, what it was like in their culture. So you can study that one more there.
What about lying to someone in order to protect them?
Lying
to someone.
So that was a good one. Again, that doesn't really come into the Old Testament law necessarily, although 10 Commandments say don't lie, didn't they?
They do, yeah.
So it sort of does.
Sort of.
The Old Testament story of Rahab might be what they had in mind about Joshua going into the Promised Land and Rahab lying to protect them, and then God seemed to honour that. So that one we might leave to Bernard.
Yeah, Bernard can pick that one up.
Pick that one up with you, Bernard, because he's doing one on the inconsistencies of God, seemingly. Why does it seem like God approves of some things and not others, like that? Or polygamy. Is that okay today? Why was it all right in the olden days, Gordon?
I don't know. We'll ask Bernard that one.
So we won't cover that one.
Okay, so on to some of the ones we will answer. We'll try to. So are the laws only relevant to certain tribes, nations, or people at that time? What do you think?
That was a good one, wasn't it? What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
So I think that God was speaking to specific people in a specific time, and that it was specifically for them. I think, like I mentioned in the sermon, Jesus has come not to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. So everything really is wrapped up in him. A lot of the civil laws, particularly, we're not Old Testament Jews living in Israel or sort of Jerusalem or anywhere like that. So the civil laws certainly aren't relevant to us. That was specifically fixed into that time. Like I say, we're grafted into Israel, as in Jesus is the metaphorical Israel. So in the Old Testament, where it talks about Israel a lot, particularly in the prophetic books, that's a prefigurement of Jesus, and the fact that we're grafted into the nation of Israel as his people.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking it's a good question. That one was from Hannah.
Hannah Clifton, yes.
Hannah Clifton. That she asked a couple of questions around this. I was thinking, what do we mean by the word relevant? Are they relevant to us, or just only certain tribes and nations? She's saying. So I was thinking, if we mean, is the law relevant to us, as in we're under it, it's how we get saved. If you break it, you're going to get punished.
Yeah.
Then it's not. I don't think it is relevant to us in that way, because I think it doesn't work like that. But if we mean it's relevant to us, as in is it useful, does it have anything to say to us? Does it reveal anything about us or about God? Then I'd say, well, yeah, it is relevant to us, and it's not just relevant to those people. So I think our other question she asked, which is a bit like its last, that one.
Yeah, go for that one. Yeah.
When did the laws change? Why did we change them, or did God change them? So why is it relevant, but in a different way? And did God change it? I think yeah, God changed the way that we relate to the laws through Jesus. So I think by Jesus coming, it basically puts a new lens on the laws, on everything that's in the Old Testament. So it doesn't disappear. It's not that it's not useful to us anymore. So there's a verse, we were talking about it earlier, Matthew 5:17 to 18, where Jesus says, I've not come to abolish the law. All of the law is going to remain. Every jot and tittle is going to remain. And so basically the laws are not like washed aside by Jesus. He fulfills them. So they're bearing over our life in terms of their I guess the way that they control us, direct us, the way we relate to God through them, no longer applies, but we come through Jesus, and somehow in him all those laws find their meaning. So in a relationship with Jesus, I think of it like if you start with Jesus and work back from him, then you should find that actually everything you'd read in the Old Testament, the moral laws, the ceremonial laws, the sacrificial laws, that you so helpfully outlined, they all find their meaning. So if you go to Jesus, you don't find that he said, that's useless, that's irrelevant. You find that somehow in him, it's like they all come alive. You get to understand what that law actually means in the light of Jesus, and how do we apply that today. So we apply them differently. They have a different kind of relevance to us. That would be one quick answer. Anything to add to that?
No, that's very good. I think one of the things is like when one of the Pharisees says to Jesus, which of the laws is the most important, trying to catch him out, and he says, actually the law can be summed up in these two things. He doesn't say, get rid of the law doesn't apply anymore, I'm here, just follow me. He says, actually, if you want to fulfill the law, then love God and love your neighbour. And he underlines the teaching of like the Mosaic law, really, like the 10 Commandments that are given to Moses when he goes up the mountain. And Jesus doesn't say actually the law's irrelevant. He says, Jesus actually, when questioned on the law himself, underlines and affirms it, and says it's necessary. In the Psalms it says that the law is a beautiful thing. It's just that we need Christ to fulfil it for us, and that's why he's so essential. Otherwise we could just try and live under the law, fulfil it, and we wouldn't do a very good job of doing that because it's so intense because of how perfect God is. But
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, on my little notes here, I wrote down that, again, in answer to that question, did God change them? Why? How do we relate to them? So I think that's where the division that you mentioned, the moral, civil and sacrificial, is useful. So yeah, God changed the way we relate to the civil laws because we're not Israel, so he doesn't expect us to relate to them as Israel did. And the sacrificial laws, we don't relate to them as Israel did because Jesus is our sacrifice and our lamb. But we do relate to them in the sense that in them there are truths or principles that we can learn from in a kind of less direct way, you could say. But the moral law, they all overlap, as you said. They all like intertwine. The moral laws which talk about care for one another and all that. We don't obey it in like, oh, there's a law that says I better go and do that, like leaving grain at the side of a field. Because you think, well, I haven't got a field, so have I got to buy one? Have I got to go and like spend my money on a field to obey that law? Otherwise, I haven't obeyed it. Well, no, clearly not. I haven't got to do that. But what does it mean? Surely he's got something to say about loving,
caring for one another, looking out for the marginalised. Definitely. I think that's it. It's not what the specificity of the law actually says in the black and white as we see it in the Old Testament. It's all about what is the underlying principle, and how can we extrapolate the truth from that, from some 2,000 odd years ago, and apply that to modern day. And it would be about caring for widows and orphans and foreigners and immigrants and all sorts of people that would be marginalised by our society, and if we didn't have good, appropriate care for them, their lives would be awful. And it's about looking out beyond ourselves to try and be a blessing to other people. And in every law, there's, whether it be the civil ones or even some of the ceremonial ones in some way, there's a sense of looking beyond yourself to find the character of God and how his character applies to all of these different situations. And it's very specific in the there and then, because Israel was a wandering nation that was wandering through, it needed hygiene laws so that they didn't get sick in the way that they were handling their food, and in the way that they were washing, the way they handled their bodies and lots of things. That's not appropriate to us in the society that we live. So we don't live under that. Jesus came and fulfilled that. He's the feasts and all of the different things. He says, I am those things. I've fulfilled them. You don't need to obey those things. I've done it. Whereas in a lot of the other things, particularly the moral law, like Adam says, there's so much that we can learn from that, because it's about healthy society. It's about how we treat one another. It's about how we care and love for other people, how we don't get bound up with worshipping other things because we covet in our neighbours' possessions, which might not be an ox, but it might be their car, it might be their phone, and there's all sorts of different things. And it's more the principle of the spirit of the law, I guess, that we're trying to.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like in your own Bible reading, so you might think reading Leviticus, for example. There's a lot of laws in there. You think, well, how's that relevant to me? And what do I do in my quiet time if I'm reading that? That's a real minefield. That is a challenge, and I think that's where we do well to read more widely books, research on the internet, what it means. Ask people, what does this book mean? How do you read this book? And so, I remember one thing that I learned at college was about Leviticus, was that if you bear in mind that the main theme that comes through in Leviticus is holiness. That's the kind of thing, and all the commentators say it's all about holiness and purity. That's the thing that you've somehow got to think through. Okay, if that's what this is about, how does this apply to me today? And all these little details, they might seem a bit picky and fiddly, and they don't apply to me, but actually they're all showing how holy God is, and how holy he wants his people to be, and how he wants them to be separate, not separate from the world as in we remove ourselves from a society, but it's like we're like in ourselves, and as a church community we're walking in holiness and purity because we're close to Jesus and his spirit is working in us. So we represent, like you said, the spirit of the law, the heart of the law, of the purity of Leviticus, say, that's outlined. But it's not like we're living under each... It's
not something we've got to...
each
detail
bar
we have to jump over.
It's not a bar we jump over. It's something that should be growing in us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, we've got too many questions to get through today. we might have to come back
for
part B, because that was only really the sort of first kind of questions there that we covered, but we got a couple of others we'll have to come back to, I think, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
That's good fun. Any jokes to finish with?
No jokes.
Any jokes to
No
finish
jokes.
with, Gordon? You must have one. Come on, mate.
No, not any good ones. No, sorry, mate.
Good. Well,
brilliant. It's been a pleasure.
Been nice chatting.
Well done.
Been nice chatting to you. Yeah. Come back to us if it's confusing, because we've just sort of like talked off the top of our heads and made a few notes on some things. But
excellent. And you can still tweet in, text in. The slide will come up in a moment. So if you've got any Old Testament questions, send them in, and over the next couple of weeks we'll try and answer them all for you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Farewell.